Vanessa Hale had negotiated 9-figure acquisitions without raising her voice. She had sat across from men twice her age and made them blink first. In 14 years of venture investing, colleagues had exactly one word for her composure: unshakable. She would think about that word a great deal. Later, on the day it stopped being true, it happened on an ordinary Thursday at the downtown library. Of all places, an unremarkable brick building, with tall windows and the particular hush that libraries still manage to hold on to even in a loud world. Vanessa had brought her daughter, Grace, to the children's reading room because her therapist had suggested it. Structured, low-pressure environments, new sensory input without demands. Vanessa had tried everything else: 4 specialists, 2 hospitals, a small fortune in equipment and evaluations, so at this point, structured and low pressure sounded almost like giving up. But she went anyway, because Grace hadn't spoken a word in 11 months, not since the accident that took her father, and Vanessa had started to believe that trying anything, even something small, was the only thing keeping her from drowning. Grace sat at a low round table, 6 years old, blonde hair in a loose braid. Vanessa had done that morning with hands that shook slightly from the coffee she'd had too much of and the sleep she hadn't had enough of. Grace was looking at a picture book without really looking at it, the way she looked at most things now, present in the room but somewhere else, entirely, somewhere Vanessa couldn't follow no matter how hard she tried. A man crouched down at the low table across from Grace, not intruding into her space, just settling into the small chair meant for children, with the ease of someone used to making himself smaller for someone else's comfort. He had a boy with him, maybe 8, who immediately started building something out of the block bin in the corner. The man glanced at Grace, at the way her eyes tracked the room but never landed on him, and something in his expression shifted. Recognition, maybe, or memory. He lifted his hands and began to sign. Vanessa, seated a few feet away pretending to read emails she wasn't reading, watched without understanding. The way she'd learned to watch everything about Grace's silence, desperately, uselessly. The man's hands moved slowly, deliberately. "Hi, my name is Sam. That's a good book." Grace's eyes moved to his hands. Just his hands, not his face. The way she'd learned to track things that felt safer than eye contact. But she was watching. Vanessa's heart did something complicated in her chest. Some mixture of hope and the specific pain of hope after too many disappointments. The man, Sam, kept signing, unhurried, like he had all the time in the world and nowhere else to be. "I have a boy, too. His name is Theo. He likes trucks. Do you like trucks or books better?" Grace's small hand moved, uncertain, halting. But it moved, fingers curling into a shape that Vanessa didn't recognize but that made Sam's face soften into something warm. Books, Grace had signed, one word. The first communication Grace had offered anyone in any form in 11 months. Vanessa's laptop slid off her knees. She didn't notice. She was on her feet before she understood she'd stood up. One hand pressed flat against her chest like she could hold her own heart in place. Vanessa's voice broke on the single syllable. Did you see that? Sam looked up at her, gentle, unsurprised, in a way that suggested he understood exactly what he'd just witnessed and why it mattered. "She signed books," he said quietly. "She did it perfectly. She hasn't—" Vanessa's hands were shaking now, properly shaking. The composure of 14 years dissolving in a children's reading room on an ordinary Thursday. "She hasn't communicated anything since March. Not a word, not a gesture, nothing. The specialists said it could be months, years. They said not to push." "I wasn't pushing," Sam said. "I was just talking to her the way I talk to Theo when it's a hard day for him." How does your son—" Vanessa was aware she wasn't forming complete sentences, aware that the librarian at the front desk had looked up, aware that she didn't care about any of it. Sam glanced at his son, still absorbed in his block tower, and something crossed his face, a practiced steadiness that Vanessa would come to recognize over the following weeks as the specific calm of someone who had lived through something hard enough that composure had become a discipline rather than a personality trait. "Theo lost his hearing when he was 4, Sam said. Meningitis. It took it fast. 1 week he could hear, and then he couldn't. We learned to sign together, both of us, because I wasn't going to let him feel like the world had gone silent on him just because sound had." He paused. "I don't know your daughter's story. But I know what it looks like when a kid needs a different door into a room. Sometimes it's not that they don't want to talk. It's that talking isn't the door that's open right now. Vanessa lowered herself into the small chair across from Grace, knees nearly at her chin, and looked at her daughter properly for what felt like the first time in months, not searching her face for signs of the old Grace, not grieving the daughter she used to be, just seeing the daughter in front of her, patient and small and trying. "Can you teach me," Vanessa said to Sam, "what she just said?" "I want to say it back to her," Sam showed her. Vanessa's hands were clumsy, unpracticed, nothing like the confident hands that closed deals and signed contracts worth more than most people's houses. She fumbled the shape twice before she got it right. "Books," she signed to her daughter. Grace's face changed. Not a smile, not yet, that would come later, in smaller increments over harder weeks. But something in her eyes focused, landed, connected in a way it hadn't in 11 months. She looked at her mother's hands, and then, for one full second, at her mother's face. Vanessa cried in the children's reading room of the downtown public library, unglamorously, without any of the composure that had built her career, and she did not care who saw her. Sam didn't try to fix the moment or rush her out of it. He simply stayed crouched at the small table, letting Theo continue building his tower, letting Vanessa have the space to fall apart quietly in front of a stranger who understood, better than anyone she'd met in 11 exhausting months, exactly what this moment cost and meant. "Can I ask what happened?" Sam said eventually, gently, "or is that not my business?" "Her father died in March," Vanessa said. "Car accident." She was in the car. She wasn't hurt, not physically, but she stopped talking that day and never started again. "I've tried everything. I run a venture fund. I have resources most people don't have access to, and none of it mattered. Money couldn't buy her voice back." "It's not usually about the resources," Sam said. "It's about finding the door. Sometimes the door isn't therapy, or specialists, or the right program. Sometimes it's just someone willing to meet a kid exactly where they are instead of where everyone wishes they'd be." Vanessa looked at him properly, for the first time, not as a stranger who'd interrupted her afternoon, but as a person, tired around the eyes in a way that suggested his own hard year, kind in a manner that felt entirely unperformed. "Would you?" she started and stopped, unsure how to ask for what she wanted without it sounding presumptuous. "Would you teach me?" "Sign language. Enough to talk to my daughter. I'll pay for lessons, obviously, whatever it costs." "I'm not a teacher," Sam said, "but I've got a library card and 11 years of practice, and Theo's pretty patient with slow learners. We come here most Thursdays." He glanced at Grace, then back at Vanessa. "If she wants to keep talking to Theo, and you want to keep learning, we could just do this again. No fee necessary." They did it again the next Thursday. And the one after that. Over the following 2 months, Vanessa learned enough sign language to have simple conversations with her daughter, clumsy at first, full of mistakes and patient corrections from an 8-year-old boy who'd become, somehow, one of Grace's only friends. Grace signed more each week. Small things: hungry, tired, happy, sad. Then, 6 weeks in, something bigger, an entire sentence, halting but complete, about a dream she'd had about her father. Vanessa hadn't cried like that since the funeral. This time Sam was there for that too. Their Thursday afternoons at the library became Thursday dinners, then weekend park visits, then a standing arrangement neither of them had planned but both had, somewhere along the way, stopped questioning. Sam's steadiness, the same quality that had let him crouch calmly at a child's table and offer patience instead of panic, became something Vanessa found herself leaning on in ways that had nothing to do with sign language lessons. And Vanessa's fierce, focused determination, the same quality that had built a fund from nothing, became something Sam recognized as love, once he let himself see it clearly. Grace spoke her first vocal word in September, 5 months after the accident, 4 months after that first Thursday at the library. It wasn't a big word. It was "Theo," said quietly across a picnic table at the park, directed at the boy who'd been the very first to offer her a door back into speaking, in whatever form she'd been ready to use. Vanessa didn't cry that time. She just held her daughter's small hand, signed "I love you" with fingers that had grown steady and fluent. and watched Sam's face break into the widest smile she'd seen from him yet. They were married the following spring, in a small ceremony at the same library where they'd met, in the children's reading room, with a librarian who'd watched the whole story unfold, offering to host it for free. Grace signed her vows alongside speaking them, a blend of both worlds that had become entirely her own. Theo stood beside his father as best man, 8 years old and solemn with responsibility, and signed "Proud of you" to Sam when the ceremony ended, which Sam later admitted had undone him more than any wedding vow could. Vanessa still ran her fund, still closed deals with the same sharp instincts that had made her unshakable for 14 years. But she'd learned something in that library that no acquisition had ever taught her, that the most valuable thing in the world wasn't capital or leverage or composure. It was someone willing to sit at the small table, meet you exactly where you were, and wait as long as it took for you to find your way back to your own voice.